Evaluating arguments. In this video, we're going to talk about evaluating arguments. We're also going to consider inductive and deductive arguments. This is on page 21 and 22 of the reading for this week. So again, from the book The Philosopher's Way, Thinking Critically About Profound Ideas by John Chaffee. It's available on Canvas. There are three things that are important to keep in mind when evaluating arguments. The first is how true are the reasons being offered to support the conclusion. The second is to what extent do the reasons support the conclusion, or to what extent does the conclusion follow from the reasons. This has to do with the form of the argument. And finally, we need to ask ourselves, does the argument pass both 1 and 2? So, for number 1, we're considering truth. So, how true are the reasons being offered to support the conclusion? This is a question about the content of the argument. Does each reason make sense? What evidence is offered for each reason? Is each reason true based on my experience? Can I trust the source of these reasons? The second test is asking, to what extent do the reasons support the conclusion, or to what extent does the conclusion follow from the reasons offered? This is called validity, and it has to do with the form or the structure of the argument. Here, we want to ask ourselves if the reasons and the conclusion connect to each other in the right way. Does the reason support the conclusions? Does the conclusion follow from these reasons? And finally, third, an argument is sound when its premises are true and it has a valid structure. Most of our arguments have some degree of soundness, rather than being completely sound or unsound. To have a degree of soundness means that a case can be made that the premises are true and that the structure of the argument is good. Now we're going to look at two different types of arguments. The first type of argument is a deductive argument. In a deductive argument, the conclusion necessarily follows from the reasons that are given. Here's an example of a deductive argument. All men are mortal. Nick is a man, so Nick is mortal. Here, the conclusion that Nick is mortal has to follow from the reasons that are given. In a deductive argument, because the form is so certain, if the reasons or the premises are true, then the conclusion has to absolutely follow. Second type of argument is an inductive argument. In inductive arguments, the reasons support the conclusion, but the conclusion is only more or less probable depending on how certain you are about your reasons. So here's an example of an inductive argument. It's not rained on July 27th in the last 10 years. So, it shouldn't rain on July 27th this year. This is an argument that I used on my wedding day. I was married on July 27th, and we were married outside, so I wanted to see how probable it was that it was going to rain on July 27th. So I looked at the weather report for the previous 10 years, and I discovered that it hadn't rained on July 27th in 10 years. So from this, I could conclude that it shouldn't rain on July 27th of the year that I got married. Now, this isn't certain. It could have rained. It in fact didn't, but it could have. So most of our arguments are inductive.